Hello, hello guys, Zells here. And today we'll be reading Tiny Changes and Remarkable Results, Atomic Habits. An easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones, by James Clear. Now that's out of the way, let's get into it. Atomic Habits, by James Clear. Introduction. My story. On the final day of my year of high school, I was hit in the face with a baseball bat. And my classmate took a full swing. The bat slipped out of his hand and came flying towards me before striking me directly between the eyes. I have no memory of the moment of impact. The bat smashed into my face with such force that it crushed my nose into a distorted U shape. The collision sent my soft tissue of my brain slamming into the inside of my skull. Immediately, a wave of swelling surged throughout my head. In a fraction of a second, I had a broken nose, multiple skull fractures, and 2 shattered eye sockets. When I opened my eyes, I saw people staring at me and running over to help. I looked down and noticed spots of red on my clothes. One of my classmates took the shirt off his back and handed it to me. I used it to plug the stream of blood rushing from my broken nose. Shocked and confused, I was unaware of how seriously I had been injured. My teacher looped his arm around my shoulder, and we began the long walk to the nurse's office, across the field, down the hill, and back into our school. Random hands touched my sides, holding me upright. We took our time and walked slowly. Nobody realized that every minute mattered. When we arrived at the nurse's office, she asked me a series of questions. What year is it? 1998, I answered. It was actually 2002. Who is the President of the United States? Bill Clinton. I said. The correct answer was George W. Bush. What is your mom's name? I stalled. 10 seconds passed. Patty, I consciously, ignoring the fact that it took me 10 seconds to remember my own mother's name. This is the last question I remembered. My body was unable to handle the rapid swelling in my brain and lost consciousness before the ambulance arrived. Minutes later, I was carried out of school and taken to the local hospital. Shortly after arriving, my body began shutting down. I struggled with basic functions like swallowing and breathing. I had my first seizure of the day. Then I stopped breathing entirely. As the doctors hurried to supply me with oxygen, I also decided the local hospital was unequipped to handle the situation and ordered a helicopter to fly me to a larger hospital in Schenectady. I was rolled out of the emergency room doors and toward the helipad across the street. The stretcher rattled on the bumpy sidewalk as one nurse pushed me along when another pumped each breath into me. My hand to me by hand. My mother, who had arrived at the hospital a few months before, climbed into the helicopter beside me. I remained unconscious and unable to breathe on my own as she held my hand during the flight. While my brother rode with me in the helicopter, my father went home to check on my brother and sister and break the news to them. He choked back tears and he explained to my sister that he would miss her 8th grade graduation ceremony that night after passing my siblings off to family and friends. He drove to Schenectady to meet my mother. When my mom and I landed on the roof of the hospital, a team of nearly 20 doctors and nurses sprinted into the helipad and wheeled me into the trauma unit. By the time swelling in my brain had become so severe I was having repeated post-traumatic seizures. My broken bones needed to be fixed. I was in no condition to undergo surgery. After yet another seizure, my third of the day, I was put into a medically induced coma and placed on a ventilator. My parents were no strangers to this hospital. 10 years later, they have entered the same building on the ground floor after my sister was diagnosed with leukemia at age 3. I was 5 at the time. My brother was just 6 months old, and after 2.5 years of my tomography treatment, spinal taps, and bone marrow biopsies, my little sister finally walked out of the hospital happily, healthy, and cancer-free. And now, after 10 years of normal life, my parents found themselves back in the same place with a different child. While I slipped into a coma, the hospital sent a priest and social worker to comfort my parents. It was the same priest they had met with them a decade earlier on the evening they found out my sister had cancer. As day faded into night, a series of machines kept me alive. My parents slept restfully on the hospital mattresses. One moment they would collapse from fatigue. The next they would be wide awake with worry. My mother would tell me later, it was one of the worst nights I ever had. My recovery. Mercifully, by the next morning, my breathing had rebounded to the point where the doctors felt comfortable releasing me from the coma. When I finally regained consciousness, I discovered I had lost my ability to smell. At the test, my nurse asked me to blow my nose and sniff an apple juice box. My sense of smell returned, but to everyone's surprise, the act of blowing my nose forced air through the fractures in my eye socket and pushed my left eye outward. My eyeball bulged out of the socket, held precariously in place by my eyelid and an optical nerve attaching my eye to my brain. The ophthalmologist said my eye would gradually slide into place as the air seeped out, but it was hard to tell how long this would take. It was scheduled for surgery 1 week later, which will allow me some additional time to heal. I looked like I'd been on the wrong end of a boxing match. But I was cleared to leave the hospital. I returned home with a broken nose, half a dozen facial fractures, and a bulging left eye. The following months were hard. I felt like everything in my life was on pause. I had double vision for weeks. I literally couldn't see straight. It took more than a month, but my eyeball did eventually return to its normal location, between the seizures and my vision problems. It was 8 months before I could drive a car again. At physical therapy, I practiced basic motor patterns like walking in a straight line and a straight line. I determined not to let my injury get me down, but there were more than a few moments when I felt depressed and overwhelmed. I became painfully aware of how far I'd gone to I had to go when I returned to the baseball field 1 year later. Baseball has always been a major part of my life. My dad played minor league baseball for the St. Louis Cardinals, and I had a dream of playing professionally too. After months of rehabilitation, I wanted to get more than anything was to get back on the field. My return to baseball was not smooth. The season rolled around. I was the only junior to be cut from the variety baseball team. I was sent down to play with the Summerfields on junior varsity. I've been playing since age 4. And for someone who has spent so much time in front of the sport, getting cut was humiliating. I vividly remember the day it happened. I sat in my car and cried as I flipped through the radio. just researching for a song that'll make me feel better. After a year of self-doubt, I managed to make the Rise team as a senior, but I rarely made it on the field. In total, I played 11 innings of high school varsity baseball, barely more than a single game. Despite my lackluster high school career, I still believed I could become a great player. And I knew that if things were going to improve, I was the one responsible for making it happen. The turning point came 2 years after my injury. When I began college at Denison University. It was a new beginning, and it was a place where I would discover the surprising power of small habits for the first time. How I learned about habits. Attending Denison was one of the best decisions of my life. I earned a spot on the baseball team, and although I was at the bottom of the roster as a freshman, I was thrilled. Despite the chaos of my high school years, I knew I had to become a college athlete. I wasn't going to be starting on the baseball team anytime soon, and I focused on getting my life in order. While my peers stayed up late and played video games, I built good sleep habits and went to bed early each night. In the messy world of a college dorm, I made a point to keep my room neat and tidy. The rooms were minor, but they gave me a sense of control over my life. I started to feel confident again. This growing belief had rippled into a classroom as I improved my study habits and managed to earn straight A's during my first year. It feels long, but it isn't. A habit is a routine or behavior that's performed regularly, and in many cases, automatically. As each semester passed, I accumulated small but consistent habits that ultimately led to results that were unimaginable to me when I started. For example, for the first time in my life, I made it a habit to lift weights multiple times per week. And the year that followed, my 6'4" frame bulked up from a featherweight 170 to elite lean 200 pounds. When my smartphone season arrived, I earned a starting role on the pitching staff. By my junior year, I was voted team captain, and at the end of the season, I was selected for the all-conference team. But it's not until my senior season that my sleep habits, study habits, and strength training habits really began to pay off. 6 years after I've been hit in the face with a baseball bat, flown to the hospital and placed into a coma, I was selected as a top male athlete at Denison University and named to the ESPN Academic All-America team, an honor given just to 33 players across the country. By the time I graduated, I was listed in the school record books in 8 different categories. The same year, I was awarded the university's highest academic order, the President's Medal. I hope you forgive me if it sounds boastful, but to be honest, there's nothing legendary or historic about my athletic career. I never ended up playing professionally. However, looking back on those years, I believe I accomplished something just as rare. I fulfilled my potential, and I believe the concepts in this book can help you fulfill your potential as well. We all face challenges in life. This injury was one of mine, and the experience taught me a critical lesson. Changes that seem small and unimportant at first will compound into remarkable results and are willing to stick with them for 4 years. We all deal with setbacks, But in the long run, the quality of our lives often depends on the quality of our habits. With the same habits, you end up with the same results. But with better habits, anything is possible. Maybe there are people who can achieve incredible success overnight. I don't know any of them, but I'm certainly not one of them. Wasn't one defining moment of my journey from medically induced coma to academic All-American. There were many. It was a gradual evolution. Along a series of small wins and tiny breakthroughs, the only way I made progress, the only choice I had, was to start small. And I employed the same strategy a few years later when I started my own business and began working on this book. How and why I wrote this book. In November 2012, I began publishing articles at jamesclear.com. For years, I've been keeping notes about my personal experiments with habits, and I was finally ready to share some of them publicly. I began by publishing a new article every Monday and Thursday. Within a few months, this simple writing habit led to my first 1,000 email subscribers. And by the end of 2013, that number had grown to more than 30,000 people. In 2014, my email list expanded over 100,000 subscribers, which made it one of the fastest growing newsletters on the internet. But I felt like an imposter when I began writing 2 years earlier. But now I've become the known expert on habits, a new label that excited me but also felt uncomfortable. I had never considered myself a master of the topic, but rather someone who was experimenting alongside my readers. In 2015, I reached 200,000 email subscribers. And signed a book deal with Penguin Random House and began writing the book you're reading now. As my audience grew, so did my business opportunities. I was increasingly asked to speak up at top companies about the science of habit formation, behavior change, and continuous improvement. I found myself delivering keynote speeches at conferences in the United States and Europe. In 2016, my articles began to appear regularly in major publications like Time, Epicure, and Forbes. Incredibly, my writing was read by over 8 million people that year. Coaches in FNL, NBA, and MLB began reading my work and sharing it with their teams. At the start of 2017, I launched the Habits Out Academy, which became the premier training platform for organizations and individuals interested in building better habits in life and work. Fortunate 500 companies and growing startups began to enroll their leaders and train their staff. In local, over 10,000 leaders, managers, coaches, and teachers graduated from the Habits Academy, and my work with them has taught me an incredible amount about what it takes to make habits work in the real world. Ooh, I think I clipped it. And that was today's video. Hope you enjoyed. And see you guys again very, very soon. Later.